Grit rained down on them. Diaz waited, hearing the whimpering moans of the injured. 6 seconds, 10, 20. The shelling had ceased. A ground assault was imminent, and there was only one way it could come. He leapt from the emplacement onto the ramp of the bridge. Stray, loose enemy shots spat past him. He took his sword and carved a line in the rockcrete between the lion plinths, 30 meters short of the rockcrete barricade.
"Mark this!"
he yelled to his men.
"This far and no further! We stop them here!"
He was answered by a rousing cheer. Diaz squared up and looked along the empty length of the bridge. The enhanced optics of his visor showed him things his human forces could not yet see. Heat tracks and motion traces in the smoke. The enemy had appeared. The plasma fire of Thys Roos's hoplites did not seem to stop the charge. The range was short, the line of fire was clear, and the rate sustained. The Solar Auxilia were Void veterans, equipped to fight in any environment, famed for their stubborn endurance. Their man-portable plasma guns and Volkite rifles had been engineered for boarding actions, designed to cut a kill path into warships. Each beam lanced out with a shriek, lurid pink and bright as neon. The air was already wretched with the choking stink of superheated plasma and leaking coolant. But the charge did not falter. Across the top of his raised shield, Diaz watched in resignation. The combined firepower around him, heavy plasma weapons, Volkite guns, the rotary cannons of the Gehenid, the Space Marines' bolters. It should have torn a regiment to shreds. The charge did not falter. The World Eaters were crossing the bridge en masse. They appeared through the backwashed smoke, howling, augmented voices baying like wild cattle. Wild cattle in a slaughterhouse, Diaz thought, stampeding to die. There was the most exquisite streak of pain at the heart of every war cry, like a vein of pure agony running through the booming rage. They were massive. They seemed, even to Diaz, bigger than legionaries. Like the feral traitor he and his brothers had killed in that water-choked thoroughfare. They were bounding and galloping, some propelling themselves on all fours like great apes. They were lumbering ogres in size and movement, but their speed was shocking. The wave of white armor spewed across the bridge like a horizontal avalanche. Some still wore the high horn crests and roaring Sarum visors that distinguished the 12th, but many had passed through the recognizable forms of legionaries and had become hulking, hunchbacked monsters, bareheaded and insane. Eyes and brows had receded, jaws had extended and swelled, mouths had become the screaming maws of saltwater reptiles, of cave bears, of giant carnivorous ocean fish. Blood ran from stretched lips. Foam and spittle flew from hooked teeth and exposed gums. Beaded strands of hair and cranial cables whipped and shivered behind their heads in writhing manes. They brandished chain blades, executioner's axes, spiked mauls, maces, falks, cleavers. Among them came other horrors, baying never-born spawn that ran like hyenas, or totted like biped goats and rams, loping hybrids of man and aether, scurrying vermin that dripped blood and oozed warp light. Flocks of winged things followed the mass, flapping overhead or swooping across the gully beside the bridge. Some were half-feathered, half-flayed, the size of vultures, cawing like crows. Others were small, fluttering in clouds with frayed moth wings, or iridescent pinions that beat rapidly and buzzed. The hoplites kept firing. The Gehenid kept firing. Diaz kept firing. Bright pink beams seared into the onrushing mass. Rotary blasts mowed into armor and flesh. Bolter shells detonated. World Eaters burst, burned through and fell, crushed beneath the following tide. Goatkin were torched. Swooping bat-winged monstrosities caught fire and plunged into the gully like meteors. But for everything that fell, spilt or seared or ignited or hollowed out by loyalist gunfire, there were more behind. Trampling the dead underfoot, filling gaps, bearing on, heedless. Diaz saw a World Eater lose an arm, sliced clean off by a plasma beam. The arm tumbled away like debris. The World Eater kept coming, oblivious. A Volkite shot tore away one horn and half the face of another. It did not stop. The charge did not falter. The charge would not falter. The berserk mass engulfed the defensive line at the head of the bridge. The vast spans of the Pons Solar shuddered. In the final few seconds, Diaz clamped his emptied bolter to his thigh plate and wrenched his long sword out of the ground where he staked it. He screamed the war cry of his legion, but it was drowned out by the howling and the mass collision. From the moment the charge began, time had seemed to speed up. Diaz noticed that as he gripped his blade and hoisted his shield. The experience of mass combat usually had the opposite effect. Time usually slowed to a dreaming ballet where battle became a detached eternity. But on the Pons Solar, time had run berserk. Infected by the World Eater's mad urgency, it accelerated, almost comically, like a picked playback jammed on fast wind, devouring seconds as greedily as the World Eaters devoured distance and pain. Time ate itself, gorging on moments with a maniacal appetite that matched the World Eaters' deranged hunger to reach and obliterate their prey. Frenzy followed. Skill was banished. Lunatic, hyperactive time allowed no opportunity for technique. Camba Diaz was strong as any Imperial fist. He judged that every single World Eater coming at him was stronger by far, enhanced by rage and the warp beyond even transhuman limits. His only real weapon of value was his mindset. The heritage of the Seventh, the unquestioning, indoctrinated will to stand and deny. That focus kept him planted like a rock. The discipline, that Praetorian defiance, branded on his genetics, and reinforced by decades of intense training and the voice of Rogel Dawn, stripped all fear from him, annihilated doubt and hesitation, erased any notion that what he faced was better, or stronger, or faster, or bigger than him. The mindset fixed him. It anchored him like extreme gravity. It locked Blumel and Thies Roos too. It pinned them in place, though time around them had unhinged and become a psychotic blur that permitted no skill. Diaz stood in the name of his Lord Dorn. He brought his siege shield up. It held firm, absorbing the first impact, demolishing a roaring face. His sword swung, carving a World Eater through the chest and throat. A chain axe struck his shield in a welter of sparks. He cleaved the face and shoulder of its owner. He hooked a keening goph thing off its hooves and cast it tumbling through the air. Blood sprayed, torn meat spattered, in the name of his lord, Dorn. He shield smashed a World Eater aside so hard it broke neck bones. His long sword speared into a howling maw, punching through the back of the skull. It tore free through cheek and ear and mastoid and occipital bones. Metal fragments spalled, glittering. A Faux tore a chunk off his vambrace. A blade cut his ribs. He took a head off its shoulders, sent it spinning like a ball. A piece of severed horn bounced off his visor. He broke a World Eater's jaw with his shield rim and gutted him as he staggered aside. He split a head down to the lower teeth. In the name of his lord, Dorn. A beam of pink plasma screamed past his ear. A Gehenna fell against him, his face bitten off, and slid down his hip and leg. Diaz kicked. He disemboweled. He broke a power lance with his shield and siphed off the arms wielding it. Diaz hacked. He carried a charging World Eater over his head on his shield, cast him off the bridge rail. He impaled. He chopped a darting witch dog through the neck and spine. Blood and black ichor filmed his plate. He barely noticed the chainsword gash across his right thigh, or the broken spear tip protruding from his hip.
Focus. Maintain focus.
Diaz swung in the name of his lord, Dorn. Broken teeth flew up, a cracked tusk, a whole eyeball ejected by crushing force. Chain blades screeched, cinders, aerial jets. A hoplite thrashed, burning alive. A plasma gun overheated, detonating. A dozen figures in the blast zone vaporized or staggered ablaze. Diaz struck off an arm, a face, on a downswing another head, a grasping hand, in the name of his lord Dorn.
Focus.
A mist from steaming innards, corpses lolled still upright, unable to fall in the density of the press. An Excertus trooper flew overhead, flailing, eviscerated. Diaz swung, blood erupted. The concussion of a mace, unremitting impacts. Blumel at his side, mashed faces with a power hammer, swinging like a smith. Feet caught on unseen corpses, a carpet of bodies and parts of bodies. Diaz ripped his sword through ceramite and meat, split a skull, sliced a throat. Thys Rus, in the name of his lord, struck with a captured Faux. Another Faux impaled clean through his torso. The reek of death, broken chainblade teeth pinged out like bullets. The stench of blood, the cloud of rage, a frenzy in him that matched the frenzy he fought. In the name of Dorn! Blurring violence, Diaz struck, sword buried deep in plate and black carapace. Thys Rus on his knees, stabbing. A Gehenna screamed. A rotary cannon fired blind, point blank. Blood on everything. Blumel, one pauldron gone, drove his hammer into a monster twice his size. Hair braids whipping and snapping at the impact. Diaz struck. He struck again. In the name of his lord, Dorn. Again, more. His long sword snapped. He drove the broken blade into a throat, to the hilt. He punched, empty-handed, breaking face bones. He killed a World Eater with his shredded shield, wrenching the purring chain axe from the traitor's hands, rotating it, making it his own. He swung, he struck. Thys Rus knelt, headless. Diaz drove the squealing chain axe through World Eater's plate, a fountain of gore, thunder, carnage, time rushing headlong, in the name of his lord. Blood flying, bone snapping, flesh tearing impacts. Collapses, swinging, striking, pinned. The name of Dorn. Frenzy, glory, Diaz. Smoke blind, blood blind. Striking, again, Camba Diaz. Thrusting, cutting, gutting, striking, slaying, in the name of his lord. Pinned, unmoving, unmovable. The line he had sliced in the rockcrete of the bridge between the lion plinths still lay behind him.